Hey everybody, welcome to the Georgia Show. Tonight we will have a full prediction of the Dogs 2023 season, the schedule, the breakout players. We'll talk a little bit about a 5-star visit weekend list as well. It's time for the Georgia Show. Let's go.
Better never rest.
Careless in the sky. What a thrilling time to be alive.
Hey everybody, it is Georgia Show time. That was Counting Colors from a local Georgia band, Granville, out of Albany. Palmer knows him. He's hip. Rusty's going to download the album on Spotify, I'm sure. Appreciate y'all hopping in tonight. We got a full show, all the Dogs predictions you could want, and we're going to start off just kind of going game by game, rapid fire on the Dogs schedule. Of course, Georgia starts with UT Martin. A little bit later in the show, we'll talk about some individual players, but let's pull this thing up, guys. I think I know how y'all are going to call this game one opener against UT Martin, but let's go ahead and get it on the record. How do y'all see this thing going? Palmer?
W. They're going to win
Easy
that
dub
one.
for the Dogs.
I mean, I just put it on the board. You know, somebody was asking the over under on, passing attempts in the first game. I would take the over in the second half passing attempts. I would take the over, but I think that's because they're going to want to get those two younger quarterbacks some work. I think we see a good showing from Carson Beck. Running backs a little bit banged up. They're going to want to put the ball in the air more. But pretty easy dub.
Yeah, I don't think there's even Vegas odds on this. Is that correct? That's usually
I don't think so.
I haven't seen it, but somebody said a 40 number, and I was very surprised by that.
I would take. I don't know that it's even a legal Vegas odds on that, but yeah, I think Georgia should handle UT Martin. They are obviously a different class of team. And, this is one of those games where you want to come out and you want to be, even though it's early in the year, you want to be able to do some things and, air this thing out, get some guys some touches. But, look, you never know how people are going to react until you're in a game situation. And, I fully expect Georgia to win this game, hands down, pulling away and play a lot of people. But I'm interested in Carson Beck, man. I don't think we're going to sit there and see Carson Beck. Georgia could obviously hand the ball off and pound this thing and beat them and grind the clock out, but that doesn't make you better for down the line. And I think we're going to see Carson Beck throw this thing. I think we're going to see a large chunk of this UGA playbook. And you may not see players like Brock Bowers too long because you know what he can do. But you got to get Carson Beck there and get him some reps and throw one of these new receivers and just seeing how people react in game situations.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Dogs, easy dub. All right, Ball State. Now, this was supposed to be Oklahoma, right?
Yes. That was supposed to be the road trip to Norman.
Just for fun, you think Georgia would have beaten Oklahoma on the road?
I do, but it would have been an interesting test. We'll get to it later, but with Auburn, being the first road game. Remember last year's first road game? It was at Missouri, and we all remember how that one went. It's always interesting, and a road trip to Norman would have been it fit right in. So I do think that they would have won, but I think that we probably would be seeing a lot more of the starters in the opener if they were taking on a team like Oklahoma in week 2.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a great point. Would have helped out for the road prep. Yeah, Ball State, famous college that David Letterman attended. I think that's also where the viral Boom Goes the Dynamite video came out of too. It will be a lot of dynamite for Ball State to handle when they take on the Dogs.
I think the 10-day forecast on that looks a little crisp. And you start talking about a noon kickoff. So, a team coming down here, you get you some of that 95-degree weather on a Saturday. It's going to be much more pleasant, it looks like, at this point this weekend than it will be next weekend. Then you throw in a noon kickoff. So I expect Georgia to handle their business there. And that's one of those ones, Wes, where if you do what you're supposed to do, and because of that heat, You get those guys out of there and you let somebody else finish that second half because you want those legs fresh and recovery. You want those legs fresh and recovery going into that first SEC game, a national televised game the next week versus South Carolina.
All those hot practices are going to pay off for that Ball State game. Maybe South Carolina too. I think Georgia will handle South Carolina by the end of the game, but I won't be surprised if Spencer Rattler rides a little bit of that momentum he had at the end of last season and makes this thing a little bit more interesting for Georgia, maybe through the first quarter and a half, 2 quarters than people think.
No, I agree there. I do think that South Carolina team is one that could be coming in with a lot of momentum, especially if they are able to win in a big opener there in Charlotte this weekend against North Carolina. One more quick note I'll add on that Ball State game, because I think it's important with the South Carolina one. I think that's when we'll start to see, some of these banged up players. That's the biggest storyline with this team right now is injuries. They're banged up Bulldogs and, Kendall Milton, Dejan Edwards, Kamari Lassiter, Smile Munden. All these guys are starting to come back and get closer and closer to the field. They may not play this week, but I definitely think that we're seeing those guys getting more reps against Ball State.
How do you expect South Carolina to come in, Rusty?
Let me say this first. I do think South Carolina is going to carry in some momentum from last year. I look at Georgia, and I had a tweet out yesterday. You guys may have saw that about what I think it takes to beat Georgia, and the proof is elite quarterback play and usually an elite wide receiver. C.J. Stroud did it even in a loss. So the 3 games they've lost in 2020, since 2020, Mac Jones went for 417. Kyle Trask went for 475 and 4 touchdowns with Kyle Pitts. And then Bryce Young, obviously, in that SEC championship game with Jameson Williams, got into Georgia pretty good for 4 touchdowns, I believe, as well. Saying that, I'm not sure that Rattler has that type of game in him against a Georgia defense. And that's not a slight to him. That defense has done that to some really, really good teams. And that'll be the first game, I think, that you'll really see the Georgia fan base gassed up for. That's a 3:30 game. It's ideal. That gives you time to get down there and get tailgating, get that adult hydration in you. You know what Kirby's going to say, and Kirby's going to say it that Monday. We should do the drinking game. He's going to challenge the fans on Monday to impact that game like they did the Arkansas Day games, like they've done other games in recent years. So I think Georgia handles that game, and I think they're gonna take care of business pretty good. And I don't think that's going to be indicative of the rest of the season for South Carolina. I just think Georgia is a bad matchup for South Carolina. I don't think Spencer Rattler has enough people around him offensively to give Georgia a huge threat.
UAB, an interesting matchup for Carson Beck. He could have started against the Blazers a couple years ago, but then Stetson Bennett kind of impressed Todd Monken enough to take that job and never look back. I think Beck will have a little bit of
isn't that ironic?
I think he'll have a little bit of firepower ready for the Blazers this time, and he probably won't be playing that whole game. That's a dub.
Yeah, that was a rough Tuesday practice for Carson Beck. And if you go back and think about that practice, I think, the rumor was he threw 3 interceptions, and it kind of changed the trajectory of what was about to happen for Georgia. No slight to Carson Beck because he fought through it, and he's ultimately won the job back. But those 2 days when they gave him the job, and then his trainer leaked it, or someone leaked it that he was going to start that week, as you guys remember that. Someone leaked it from down Florida, and it just kind of snowballed on him that week. But think about that UAB game and how things were different after they made that move midweek to say we're going with Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, at Auburn, I've said it
down
for the last several weeks. I think that this game could be tricky for Georgia if it's at night, and maybe just in general, just depending on how Carson Beck handles the road. You can simulate Georgia's really good defense. It's really difficult to simulate a road game in the SEC, but I still think Georgia gets the win.
Well, and Wes, you've mentioned it before. Hugh Freeze is a coach that has had some success against Kirby. Obviously with the time that he spent there at Ole Miss. When Kirby was at Alabama, and also that first year Kirby was at Georgia. I do think that there's a revenge factor there. But like you said, that first road game can be difficult. I think Georgia wins. And in my season predictions I put out, I think Lad McConkey has a big game. He had a big one there last time, and I could see that being another one.
Now, I'll say this. When Auburn and Jordan Hare that place is rocking, especially like Wes said, you go there at night, that's all that you want in a fan base. I mean, they can come unhinged there, and certainly they can be loud and have impact on a game, but I'm not going to sit here and say their roster's where it needs to be. And people I talk with that have watched Auburn and people that know that roster said, man, they're a good ways away, offensive line and defensive line. They are desperately trying to change those rooms. And when you think of the strength of Georgia, you start talking about grown men, it's the offense and defensive line. So, that may be one of those games, Wes, where Georgia fans might get into Bobo some because they might just run it down their throat. It might be an old fashioned, just 27-3, not really explosive plays, just run it down their throat and, kind of suffocate in a Kirby way. He does. He'll suffocate a game out. He'll run that clock as long as he can if he gets a lead. So I can see that game playing out. But I'm telling you, I've been there many times, and there's not many places on earth for a sporting event that's louder than that place when it's rocking.
No.
Well, and there's a shot that's an 8 p.m. kick because if
Sure.
I'm not mistaken, that is the SEC triple header week on ESPN. So they get a 9 p.m. Eastern kick that has to be in the Central Time Zone. So
they'll be hydrated down there.
Yeah. They're going to need some extra EMTs in the stands for that one. All right, Kentucky coming to town October 7th. You look at this Georgia schedule and you think, maybe that South Carolina game is the final SEC primetime kick on CBS for Georgia between the hedges, but I'm going to put a pin in Ole Miss down the road, but Kentucky could be undefeated by this game too.
Yeah, Kentucky, I think the job that Mark Stoops has done there has been vastly underrated. I mean, they've won some big games. They've lost some head scratchers. The Vanderbilt game last year, you start wondering how they lost that game. But Kentucky's one of those teams, and all three of us have been on the sideline the last 2 years. When you see Kentucky come out, you go, damn, they look pretty good in pads. And their DB, I don't know where they get these 6'2" corners, but they just keep stacking these kids. Mm-hmm. And, they could give you some. They got another transfer quarterback. So, to me, when you look at those first few games, I'm not hesitant to say that Kentucky could be the toughest test for Georgia to this point.
No, absolutely.
Still pick a W for Georgia.
Yes.
Absolutely there with Devin Leary coming in and some very talented wide receivers, Berrien Brown.
That's the one, Berrien Brown.
Dane Key. I mean, and then they bring in a 1,000-yard rusher from Vanderbilt. Liam Cohn comes back from after a 1-year trip out west with the Rams. I do think Kentucky's going to be one of Georgia's biggest tests this year. I've still got them winning that, but I mean, my score prediction was within 2 scores.
Yeah. No, I mean, they can play tough. They can do it on the road and at home. We've seen it the last 2 years.
And they muck it up too. Mark Stoops and that system will muck it up.
Yeah, no, he likes to get after Kirby. At Vandy, the stadium under construction, and they might need a little bit more construction after Georgia tears through there. That's a W.
100%. I'd be interested in see that aerial shot because the Georgia fans invade Nashville, as we all know. And when you get limited seats, Georgia fans aren't going to not go to Nashville. So that one's going to be real interested to look at those two sides of that stadium. And is there any black and gold left? Because I know a ton of Georgia fans, and they're all going to Nashville. Like they're all going to Nashville.
I know people that bought Vanderbilt season tickets just for that Georgia game.
That makes sense.
I mean, Clark Lee is yet to score against Georgia. Obviously, they didn't match up in that 2020. Well, I guess he wasn't there in 2020, but 2021 and 2022, 117-0 is the combined score of Georgia over Vanderbilt. So that's the big storyline to me. Can Clark Lee, AJ Swan, and that Commodore offense punch one in the end zone, or get a field goal.
All right, Florida and Jacksonville got the bye week before that. The Gators really getting dumped on by everybody, guys. I've seen some predictions that they'll only win 4 games. For me, I'll have to see that to believe they'll be that bad, but I still don't think they'll match up against this Georgia team as they're trying to figure out what they do with their roster. So the Dogs win this one pretty easily.
Same. It's going to be a lot of hydration.
That's a common theme on this schedule with Georgia fans. Lots of hydration. No, I'm very curious to see Florida tomorrow night when they take on Utah. Excited that that's a Thursday night game as opposed to a Saturday night game that conflicts with Georgia. Really, again, we said it with Kentucky, a transfer quarterback for Florida, Graham Mertz. Interested, they've got some talent at running back. Interested to see. I am not all too high on the Gators, but that's a game that always gets interesting.
Following week, Mizzou in Athens. I don't think Georgia's going to be surprised by Eli Drinkwitz and this team. Georgia handles the Tigers between the hedges. Even though this series is kind of weird, I don't think the Tigers are going to sneak up on Georgia in this one.
You have that one game a year, and it almost seems like it's Missouri. And I'm telling you, they're down 10, and Dominic Lovett gets hurt, changed the whole trajectory of that game. So, you just think about coming off that floor. I don't care what Florida's record is. That's still a massive game to go down there and get pumped up forward. And you're an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, and you're undefeated this time. You're number one. You're thinking about those next 2 games with Ole Miss and Tennessee. There's no question. But you got a little team coming here called Missouri, and they played well last year. I know Kirby Smart's going to show them that tape and show them, hey, this is what almost happened right here. This was almost a team that beat us. And for whatever reason, man, Missouri they just played Georgia well. My question is, where will they be at this point in the season? Because if they don't play well or win some games, that seat's going to get pretty hot out there for him.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, you've got to think that Dominic Lovett's going to want to have a great game there. So
Yep.
I do think – and that offensive line too. I mean, Missouri's got a talented defensive line, a defense that returns some guys. That offensive line is going to be motivated to want to have a really good game because, Kirby said after that game, we got our butts kicked in on that line of scrimmage for 3.5 quarters, and that's what made that a game. And so I think you're going to have some revenge factor there with that offensive line, and then with Lovett as well.
All right, I think Ole Miss, the Kirby Lane Kiffin Bowl. I think there's a good chance this one could be Georgia's final 3:30 CBS game before everything switches away from CBS. With Georgia looking ahead potentially, it's human nature. I know they're disciplined, but Tennessee that next week on Rocky Top, this one's going to be close, but I still think Georgia survives because it is that difficult to win in Athens these days.
Go ahead, Wes. I'll give you mine after. Go ahead, Palmer.
I think, with it being senior day, I think that they're going to be ready and focused. That's something that we always hear from Kirby, and the importance of doing this for the seniors and the home records and, all that shine that comes out for them, typically a little bit later than this one. But like we mentioned with Hugh Freeze, Lane Kiffin is somebody that is a little bit of an offensive guru and knows what Kirby does. I think that they're able to put up some points, but ultimately I do think that defensively they haven't really been able to figure it out, and I think that Georgia is able to put up more points.
This will be the game I think Georgia plays the best in, and listen. Lane Kiffin is one of the best play callers in the country, and they're a hold your breath on offense because they'll carve you up now. And they got a great running back in Junkins, and they got a transfer kid out of Rome, Griffin, who came from Oregon State. Jemias Griffin, who was Gatorade Player of the Year, just transferred in over there. So they got extra running back depth. And they got, I don't know how he's done it, but he's got like 9 quarterbacks in that room, and got like dudes that were starting other places to transfer. So I think Georgia is going to – I think Ole Miss, this is finally going to catch them defensively because, man, they have lived and died in that portal. And I just think you got to have more development on the guys you sign. And you can go get pieces of the puzzle. But, man, Ole Miss has basically been portal heavy. And in my opinion, I just don't see how that works. I think Ole Miss gets kind of exposed this year. And I think when they come to Athens, they might be a wounded dog, so to speak.
All right, this is the one everyone has circled on the calendar, at Tennessee in Knoxville. I go back to 2 seasons ago. Georgia had a legendary defense then, and I think this defense will be not just as good, but the shadow of that defense. Pretty freaking good, really deep. Does Tennessee have the depth to go toe-to-toe with Georgia if Georgia doesn't injure itself the way that Alabama did with penalties? I don't think so. I think Georgia still wins this one, if not pretty similarly on the road the way they did in Knoxville in 2021. Maybe it's a score closer. I still just see a big gap between what Kirby Smart's doing and what Josh Heupel's doing, even though Tennessee very well may be the second best team in this division.
Neyland can get rocking, but I do think that, and it would not surprise me one bit if this is Georgia's closest game of the year, because there is talent there. There's more talent than there has been in years past. Josh Heupel's starting to recruit well, but like you said, the depth of Georgia's defense compared to Tennessee's defense, and Kirby and Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp, they did such an incredible job last year scheming up against that powerful Tennessee offense. I do think that this defense is going to be good, Wes. I'm with you there. My prediction, they did a little bit of math after the predictions, and at least in the regular season, I've got them allowing less than 10 points a game. They probably give up a little bit more than that against Tennessee, but I do think that they win this one.
This is going to be the first major test for me for Carson Beck, because he's going into a hostile environment. I mean, let me tell you something. Those Tennessee fans know what their team walked into in Athens after it was over with. They did. And Georgia fans, they'll try to travel as good as they can. But Tennessee, I don't care what Tennessee's record is, Georgia's going to get their best shot there. I think it comes down to quarterback play. Can Joe Milton have a big enough game, like those 3 other guys I talked about, those 4 other guys, have a big enough game to take down a Georgia? Because, Georgia has seen Heupel now twice and kind of seen that offense and seen what he does. Now, what does Heupel do? Because he got a chance to see what Georgia's going to do against him. Alabama played zone and Georgia didn't. So what did he do in the offseason to try to counter that? It's going to be a huge game within the game type thing. But I think this is Carson Beck's statement game as we go into December. Can he handle this type of environment? Because it's going to be the loudest, in my opinion, that he's been in against the best team he's played, in my opinion. I think Georgia wins this game, but I'm telling you, Georgia, they had a great team last year. They didn't blow everybody out. I mean, they couldn't do really much against Mississippi State. Missouri was tough. They had to pull some games late. I think this is going to be one of those 4 quarters, full, cage match. And I think Georgia's going to find a way to end this. But I definitely think that Tennessee is going to be ready to play Georgia, and they're going to give Georgia everything they want that night in Knoxville.
At Georgia Tech, Brent Key really trying to build a lot of momentum in the state, and he's not being shy about it. I don't blame him. You got to try something when you're going up against Georgia. But the Dogs should finish the season in style for me, and that looks like an undefeated season for the Dogs for me anyway.
Yep, 3rd straight 12-0 regular season, becoming a semi-annual tradition, every other year tradition there, with 2 games in a row in Atlanta to end the season. I think that Georgia takes to the newly renamed Bobby Dodd Stadium at, Hyundai Field?
Yeah.
I think that they continue their winning streak in Atlanta.
Yeah, agree.
All right, guys. So that's an undefeated year for us. We'll get into some postseason and playoff picks a few weeks down the road here, and let the picture of the college football season shape up. But we've all been on the record. At least I know Rusty and I have. Georgia's going to three-peat. We'll break down the other semifinal teams maybe. Palmer, have you made a pick on that front?
I have got Georgia in the playoffs. I have not officially made that pick, but I do feel look, I mean, I feel better about this team coming into this season than I did last year's team going into last season with the experience that they've got. They've absolutely got as good of a shot, if not a better shot than anybody to take home a title.
All right. I like those odds. Speaking of odds, Prize Picks is your place for easy selections on really fun games this year. And we're going to start it off this season. Each week, we're going to have our picks on what the Dogs are doing. Now, as Rusty mentioned, there's nothing for Georgia this week because the opponent is so overmatched. But with Prize Picks, you can make picks within 60 seconds, and you have the opportunity to win 25 times any entry you have. Right now, with the code DAWGS, you can have your deposit matched on Prize Picks. So if you put in $50, they're going to give you 50 extra bucks. You put in 100, they'll give you 100, so on and so forth. So we're going to show you how this thing works. You can pick any sport you want to. I think they got everything other than pickleball on there. So you can go on to Prize Picks. We'll make some college football picks tonight. And if you want to take a look at it, see what we got going on, it's pretty easy. So all it is looking at what Prize Picks has as these stat lines for these players. You got rush yards, pass yards, receiving yards, all that, rushing touchdowns. And you pick your player and you decide, will they do more than that projected amount or will they do less? So no dogs on the board tonight. Florida, Utah may be the most interest for the people that are watching with the picks we can actually make. I'm going to go with Montrell Johnson taking on Utah. How do y'all feel about that?
I do like that.
57.5 rushing yards.
I do like that. But, Wes, there is some Georgia in here. If you scroll over at the top, you had to dig a little bit to find this one. But doing it, I did. College football season.
Okay, right on.
With receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. I like Brock Bowers' chance to put up more than 700 yards and more than 7.5 touchdowns.
Okay.
With the way that I think Georgia's going to put the ball in the air this year, Carson Beck and that offense, and him being the go-to guy. I mean, he's had more than 700 receiving yards each of the last 2 years. That feels like a lock. He had 7 touchdowns last year, 13 the year before. I like his chances to get above that 7 because there were a couple times last year that it felt like he was really close or they maybe underutilized him.
All right, there's nothing on Carson Beck passing yards. I like the season pick. We can check in on that at the end of the year, and then we can pick maybe one more for this week. Any other games jumping off the page for y'all? Let's see. We got Florida, Utah.
I think right now it's just the Thursday games.
Okay, so we can only pick. Yeah,
because I was looking. I mean, that, like I said, that North Carolina South Carolina game is intriguing. 2 talented quarterbacks there in Drake May and Spencer Rattler, and obviously Georgia's seeing South Carolina a little bit later. Florida is definitely the one that's intriguing for Georgia fans right now, and I'm interested to see what Jeff Sims looks like at Nebraska after transferring from Georgia Tech.
All right, so what do you think? Let's take Jeff Sims. Where's he at? Jeff Sims, more than 186.5 passing yards against Minnesota or less. So let's make our picks. Montrell Johnson, how's he going to do on the road? More than 57.5 or less?
Rusty, I'll let you make the call there.
I'll go under on that.
I think right. with Trevor Etienne there, they've got a dual two-headed monster there. I don't know that he gets that number.
Hammering the over on Brock Bowers' receiving yards, and then Jeff Sims against Minnesota. More than 186.5. Let's do it.
It's hammering.
All right, and let's do someone we think is going to bust. How about this Minnesota quarterback? More than half an interception.
Yeah, that Nebraska defense, corn dogs.
What if MJ Sherman gets a tip ball?
The corn dogs. That's all we're going. We're going with the corn dogs. All right, so let's put in $20. Place our entry. And remember, if y'all sign up for this with the code DAWGS, you're going to get your entry, your deposit matched. So we've already got a little bit in here, courtesy of Prize Picks. We're locking it in. All right, we'll check in with y'all next show and see how we did and check in on this Brock number at the end of the year. Let's bring in Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy, it is a big recruiting weekend for the Dogs. Some big visitors on this visitor list checking out UT Martin for a fun night game between the hedges. Who are you most excited to see? Who should Georgia fans be most excited to see this weekend, man?
I think the first name you have to mention is Elijah Griffin, big 5-star out of Savannah. He'll be up this way the Friday night to play a game, and then he'll stick around and go over to Georgia and watch Georgia play. That's a guy that, defensive line has been a big position at Georgia. He's one of the best, to come through here, come through the state in a while. So I think that's one that I got my eye on for sure.
Rusty, you got a list up on DawgsHQ.com. What's the storyline for you?
Well, it obviously Jeremy hit it on the head there. I mean, you got to start with Elijah Griffin because it's just you can't miss on players that are top 2 or 3 in the country, specifically defensive linemen like that, and his body type are just hard to find. When you look at him, Georgia offered real early. You see that frame. He's at 6'4.5", 270 pounds. I mean, he is. I don't know that Georgia can make a 5-tech better than him, and that's the kind of guy they're looking for. But Zayden Walker is another top player, 5-star player in the country from Sly County. He'll be in town this weekend, and his half brother Jalewis Solomon just committed to Auburn. He's taken business to Miami recently, so it's not a slam dunk with him. But I know the Georgia staff and some people, I talk with inside that building think that Zayden Walker is an absolute can't miss. Got to sign him in this class. So both of those young men right now are expected to be in town. It's not one of those crazy deep lists, but it's still anytime you have a couple of 5-stars and then in-state kids and you get a chance to showcase yourself and spend some time with those guys, you got to take advantage of every opportunity.
What's the biggest hurdle for Georgia right now as South Carolina looks like they're in the lead according to On3's RPM?
He's very close with Jeremy. Is that the young man that's at Brunswick that's committed to
Michael Smith?
Yeah. Yep. Calvary, the tight end, it's in Savannah. Yes.
Yeah.
They're really close. And even though they don't go to the same school, they're in the same town. And, every time Michael Smith went over there for a visit, it seemed like Elijah Griffin was with him. So, you look at him and how tight those guys are. So that's kind of, it's not far either from Savannah as well to Columbia. So he's been over there quite a bit. And I think, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, that last weekend of July that kind of you start kids start tipping their hand a little bit. Well, he went to South Carolina. He didn't show up in Athens. So it kind of tells you, this is time to get him back on campus and take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think, I talked with him a couple of weeks ago just about South Carolina. He seemed to really like everything they're doing, the energy that they have behind that program, the defensive line coach over there. His name is escaping me now, but I know he played in the NFL. Travion Robertson, has really made a big impression on him. He talked about his experience, that he had, playing at South Carolina, but then also playing at the next level. And he just seems like he's really connected with that program. And like you said, him and Michael Smith are really close. And, you look on the map and you think Savannah's way far away from Columbia. I did some research while I was standing there with him. Like, oh, wow, this is not far from home for you. So
That's right.
I think that's a program that, is really going to be in it. Another program that kind of popped up while we were talking was Clemson.
Yeah.
Clemson's right. South Carolina's not far from Clemson. So, that's another program that I'm watching too, just because for one, the culture, Coach Eason really has his ear over there as well. When I got there, he practiced that day in Clemson gear. So he had a Clemson shirt with Clemson shorts, Clemson gloves. So that's a program that's really emerged, especially because they don't offer a lot of guys. So that's another program that I could see him getting to and getting to campus maybe a couple times this fall.
So if you look at the top 5 players in the state of Georgia for On3, you look at Elijah Griffin, obviously he's number 1, a 5-star defensive lineman. You look at Sly County, Zayden Walker. You look at Justice Terry from Manchester. who is verbally committed to Georgia. You look at Elias Williams from Camden County, who's verbally committed to Georgia. And I do not – how do you pronounce the running back at Lee County?
Usman Kroma.
Usman Kroma. Here's what I'm getting at. Now, we've all followed recruiting for a long time. And I don't know the last time you've seen a top 5 that didn't have a player in it from Cobb County or Gwinnett County.
Yeah.
Look at this. Savannah, Ellaville, Manchester, Folkestone, and Leesburg. And let's be honest, that's the type of battles lately that Georgia has been winning. So not only are these talented football players, these are in areas that have been really, really good to Georgia. So I'm kind of interested to see how this thing plays out. Nothing slight. Here's the deal. You put Elijah Griffin into Gwinnett County, and, I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of coaches that would be at that school every single day they could be. Even Savannah, they're going to be highly recruited. But you put that kid in Metro Atlanta around all this media and all that stuff, it turns things up a notch.
Yeah, I think he's even flown under the radar from our standpoint a little bit, just because we don't see him as much.
Yeah.
I think we have him ranked number 2. I mean, it's hard to say a player that's number 2 in the country is underrated.
He's not really a national name. I get what you're saying. He's not a national name really outside of us.
Yeah,
and he should be. And he should be.
Yeah. I mean, Elias Williams is the same way. I mean, he's another one that's kind of down there that we don't talk about very often. We don't see it nationally very often, but he's another really good football player. So I definitely agree with your point. Just it's crazy that you think about the top 5 in Georgia, then none of them are in the Metro Atlanta area.
Very strange with that class. And I'll tell you this, the 25 class is loaded at premium positions. O-line, D-line, got wide receivers. Things that the state has been down for a little while, they're not down with D linemen, O linemen, and wide receivers in that class. Georgia has got to take advantage of this 25 class in state. They've got to be as heavy, in my opinion, as they've been in a while on in-state kids.
Yeah, I mean, Rusty, you nailed it, dude. When I saw that none of these guys are from Gwinnett, I was like, well, Georgia might actually get one of them.
That's where they've been winning the battles. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they've been winning those battles, and that's kind of the, I'll tell you this, Justice Terry from Manchester, I mean, he could be number 1 in a lot of states. I mean, I'm telling you, this 25 class is at the top is really, really, really good.
Jeremy, you also had a great piece on up on DawgsHQ, premium piece. Right now, 50% off an annual membership at DawgsHQ. You don't want to miss out on that, and $1 for a month as we kick off the season. A great special, and I know that won't be lasting too much longer. LJ McCray narrowing things down, and Georgia's in the mix here, but it seems to be a toss-up right now whether or not the Dogs are going to land him.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way talking to him. I didn't really get a sense that he was leaning one way or the other, and I think he's content in taking his time and making sure that he makes a good decision. Just kind of hearing what he had to say about Georgia and hearing how he carries himself. He definitely kind of has that, Kirby Smart in Georgia vibe about him, just because he's very businesslike, very thoughtful, very, thoughtful about how he approaches football. I think, and he basically said, I don't really care about playing early. I don't care what the depth chart looks like. I'm going somewhere to get developed, and I want to be a good football player 3-4 years from now. I mean, I don't hear a lot of guys say that.
Very much. Georgia may not get this kid, but it is a very similar, in my opinion, recruitment of Jordan Hall.
Yeah.
Mom and dad are heavily involved in this deal, and it's a young man from Jacksonville, Florida, and I don't think Jordan Hall really demanded that he needed to start. You know what I mean? I think that he's playing the long game, and I've heard it from more than one, and Jeremy kind of just backed that up. This kid's playing the long game. He's not worried about what he's going to get the first week he gets to the next college. He's looking at 3 years down the line and what type of player am I going to be leaving the program. So he's one of those, man, if Georgia gets him and we're able to stack Elijah Griffin in behind him, that's not good news for the rest of the country.
All right, Palmer, we'll tap you back in here, man. Wrapping up the show, we're going to go really rapid fire here. We're just going to go one guy at a time. We're not all going to explain these positions here. We're looking at the stat superlatives. Who's going to be the best in their stat? And I know this piece is coming out at DawgsHQ later on this week, so we won't have everybody's picks on the show here, but we'll just take one guy. I'll start us off. Leading rusher is Kendall Milton. All right, Palmer, who do you have as the Dogs' leading receiver at the end of the year?
Brock Bowers. I mean, we just put in the bet there. It's an easy pick. Brock Bowers.
Jeremy, leading tackler for the Dogs.
I'm going with Pop, also known as Jamon Dumas Johnson. That's who I'm going with.
All right, sack leader, Rusty.
Why'd you give me that one? Like, why'd you give the old dude the toughest one? Because
you got the experience.
Oh man, that's hard because they spread things out so much, and the linebackers are so involved, and Javon Bullard blitzes. If he gets back in time, it very well could be Smile-Monded. I think Jalen Walker is going to play a lot on third down and blitz packages. I don't think Chaz Chambliss is going to be that guy just yet. I'll go wild card here, and I don't think somebody's going to have like 6 sacks. That's not the way they're built. They spread this thing out. So I'm going to go Marvin Jones Jr. I think he's going to have a big year for Georgia. I think he can end up with 4 or 5 sacks and kind of be that guy. But I certainly think that Georgia could have multiple players with 3 or 4 sacks. If I see Damon Wilson enough the first 2 weeks, I may come back and edit this. But I got to see him play. I got to see him play between the hedges first before I try to jump on that bandwagon.
I get that. All right, we'll go Snake. So Rusty, you get 2 in a row.
Last year.
Who leads in tackles for loss?
Who's me?
Yeah.
Tackles for loss, man.
Another tough one.
Damn, I mean, can I get like
look, dude, you know the defense, so
tackles for loss. I'll go Nazir Stackhouse.
I like that pick.
Yeah, I'll go Nazir Stackhouse. He's inside there, and a lot of those carries and stuff, those tackles for 1 and 2 yard loss, they count the same.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jeremy, leader in INTs. Who you got?
I'm going to go with Javon Bullard just because I think he'll be around the football a ton. I mean, he's one of those guys that I can just see just catching a couple of that get tipped because he's just got a nose for the football, and I think he'll end up with 3 or 4 by the end of the year.
All right, Palmer, I'm going to make one up for you. Who has the most receiving? Who has the most receiving touchdowns, not just yardage?
I think it's Brock Bowers again.
Oh my gosh!
Rusty would have loved to have my 2 questions.
Yeah.
Hey, Palmer, what's 2 plus 2?
All right. How about this one, Palmer? Who's the kicker going to be?
Ooh, that's a better question. I'd go with Jared Zirkle there.
I'll take a pick.
Who you got?
I'll go Peyton Woodry.
All right. We got a little bit of drama here at the end. Let's chop some wood. Rusty, you can start. I know you want to chop wood about Kyrus Jackson, so go ahead and do it.
Oh, man, great. Just one of those things that just, man, that you saw what Kirby said. The players went wild, and listen, Kyrus Jackson was one of those kids that did everything right all the time. From high school, the time I met him early on, and I retweeted something last night. I knew Kyrus Jackson was that dude when he had Belle Biv DeVoe Poison playing at his commitment. I mean, it was blasted. I was like, I'm in the right place right here. And they had a street party. It was great. And good cookout in Fort Valley, Georgia. So, stock up, man, Kyrus. One of my favorite cities in the world, Nashville. And I hope he plays for a long time. But I know his mom and dad. I cannot even imagine the emotions they felt when he called and told them, I'm on the 53, man. And congratulations, man. And that might be the next jersey I purchase.
Man, when you come out of Peach County, that's just a different place in general. They kick off at a different time.
Yep.
It's hard. I mean, that is hard high school football down there, man. So I'm happy to see it too. I covered him as a local news reporter in Macon, and I can't believe that his career lasted as long as it did. Made me feel a little bit older. But congrats to Kieris, man. Awesome stuff. The Titans, I'm just going to say it. The Titans are my AFC team. All right. I was born in Georgia, so I feel like I had to pick the Falcons, unfortunately. But Palmer, I've wandered over, straddling the fence, and I'm cheering for the Titans this year too.
How good they're going to look in those Oilers throwback too, man. I mean, that Oilers throwback uniform is going to be fire.
They shouldn't wear anything else ever.
I agree.
Be ready for disappointment, Wes.
Okay. Trust me, I'm used to that.
On Sundays for sure.
Jeremy, what you got, man?
I'm gonna go with just, obviously I saw Quintavious Johnson this week. He's not highly ranked. Had never heard of the guy, a year ago. I'm just gonna tell Georgia fans just to trust Kirby Smart and that staff's evaluation. That's kind of my thing for this week. Every guy that you see with an offer or committed, every one of those guys can play. Whether you've heard of them, where they have 5 stars, 6 stars, 3 stars, 1 star, 0 star, all those guys can play, and it's because Georgia does a good job of getting these guys on campus, going through and getting them to camp and seeing the traits that they need to see in order to decide what they want, to fit into whatever scheme they're trying to run. And they also, take some chances on some guys that, may take a little development. They're not afraid to develop guys and let them, sit a year or two. So, that's kind of my thing. Just, that's where I'm at. Just trust in the process, trust in the evaluation of this program. That's why they're back-to-back defending national championships, landing guys like this.
Trust the evals, man. Can't say it enough. Palmer?
So it's pretty rare that you get a little nugget from these players, but on Monday, talking to Tyke Smith, he came out and said somebody that's been having a really strong camp, really been coming along in camp, has been Julian Humphrey. And I'm excited to see him play on Saturday. Obviously, up in the air whether Kamari Lassiter plays, how much he plays, but even if he plays, there's a starting spot opposite of him that's up for grabs. And so Humphrey is one of those guys that, that played in 3 games last year, redshirted, recorded 0 stats. So he's not the easiest to write about right now. But I mean, when you look at his game, and we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, that speed, that track speed, just the way that he can fly. He's got the length to play corner. He's getting a lot of praise from his teammates. So I'm excited to see it because, like I said, it's not often that you get somebody singled out by one of these players.
All right, I'll take us home. I know y'all talked about it on Bark After Dark, producer Palmer in that role, but I'll chop wood about Sonny Seiler and just everything that guy meant. We're just losing all these legends, man. So you got to appreciate these people and what they meant to Georgia, what they did for the program. You're talking about the greatest mascot in college football. It's been voted upon time and time again, and UGA's always there. Georgia Tech wants to, petition. PETA wants to take away the dog, but Sonny Seiler is a damn good dog forever, and we don't have UGA without his contributions in keeping that tradition going. So chopping wood about that guy, man. Enjoy the season, tailgating wherever you're watching the game. If you're at it, if you're doing something on Labor Day weekend, the season is here, and we're all fired up about it. Hit like and subscribe on DawgsHQ. We're back on Sunday at 8:30. We'll be back here right after the game as well. With the season starting up, our post-game show will be up immediately after each game Georgia plays, and Bark After Dark coming back 9 p.m. each Monday. And as I mentioned, 50% off your annual subscription to DawgsHQ for the kickoff special. It is still going on, or you can just try it out. Just dabble, $1 for 1 month. Hope you'll join us for the long run. For Rusty, Palmer, and Jeremy, I'm Wes. See y'all soon.